Saint Faustina recorded with sober clarity, "My guardian angel ordered me to follow him. In a moment I found myself in a place full of fire and demons. I saw many souls there. I saw things which I would never have believed if I had not seen them." Diary 741. What struck her most was not the terror, but how close this place stood to the path souls travel after death, near enough to be mistaken for a passage rather than a warning. Have you ever wondered what happens to a soul in the moments immediately after death? Have you ever considered how close light and darkness can stand to one another at the final crossing of a human life? And have you ever asked yourself why Jesus allowed Saint Faustina to witness a reality that so few are willing to believe today? In the stillness of her convent, when the evening air pressed cool against the stone walls, Saint Faustina was led into a revelation that carried no exaggeration, no spectacle, only truth. Before we continue, subscribe to walk with us through the authentic revelations of divine mercy entrusted to Saint Faustina, revealed not to frighten the soul, but to awaken it. She described how her guardian angel appeared without noise, without fear, with a calm authority that allowed no hesitation. He commanded her to follow, and in an instant, she found herself standing near a place whose atmosphere was suffocating. Heavy, burning, filled with an awareness of hatred and despair. It was not a distant abyss. It was near, disturbingly near. So near that Faustina understood something immediately. Souls do not stumble into hell by accident. They drift toward it through choices repeated quietly, persistently, until the path becomes familiar. What she saw was not chaos, but order, a terrible order. Demons moved with purpose. Souls were present not because they had been dragged unwillingly, but because they had rejected grace persistently. Faustina did not hear screams of repentance. She heard blasphemy. She heard hatred. She felt the absence of God like a wound that never closes, and she realized that the greatest torment of hell is not fire, it is separation from love itself. Her guardian angel remained beside her, steady and unmoved, as if to show her that heaven does not abandon truth, even when truth is terrifying. She sensed that this vision was not meant for curiosity. It was meant as a warning written in mercy. Jesus allowed her to see how close the gate of hell stands to the road of human life, not to push souls into fear, but to pull them back before it is too late. What shocked Faustina most was how ordinary the path appeared before it darkened. No sudden leap, no dramatic fall, just refusal, delay, resistance. The soul saying later to grace, until later became never. And then, suddenly, the gate was near. She returned from the vision shaken, not with panic, but with urgency. She understood why so few believe this truth, because believing it requires responsibility. It demands vigilance. It demands conversion. And most of all, it demands trust in divine mercy before the final hour arrives. When Saint Faustina returned from that vision, her soul was marked by a seriousness she could not shake. She did not speak of it lightly. She did not dramatize what she had seen. She carried it quietly, like a weight placed upon her heart by heaven itself. The closeness of that place lingered within her, the terrifying realization that hell was not a distant myth, but a reality standing alarmingly near the path many souls walk without reflection. She understood then why Jesus allowed her to see it, not to satisfy curiosity, not to provoke fear, but to reveal how deception works. The enemy does not announce destruction openly. He disguises it as normality, as routine, as small concessions that seem harmless when taken one at a time. Faustina sensed that most souls who reached that gate never believed they were walking toward it. They believed they still had time. Her guardian angel, calm and unwavering, remained present in her memory. He had not spoken many words. He did not explain. His silence itself was instruction. It told her that truth does not always come wrapped in comfort. Sometimes it comes as clarity that demands a response. Faustina realized that heaven respects human freedom so deeply that even eternal consequences are approached step by step, never forced, never rushed. As she prayed later that night in the chapel, the flicker of the sanctuary lamp reflected in her eyes. She felt Jesus impress another truth upon her soul. Hell is not entered because God withdraws mercy. It is entered because mercy is refused repeatedly. Every grace ignored, every confession delayed, every interior warning silenced, slowly reshapes the soul's direction. And direction, she understood, matters more than intention. She remembered how ordinary the path had seemed before the darkness thickened. Nothing outwardly shocking, no immediate rupture. The soul continues its habits, speaks familiar words, lives among others, yet inwardly resists surrender. Faustina felt how dangerous this state is precisely because it feels safe. The soul tells itself it is not lost. It tells itself God understands. It tells itself repentance can wait. And while the soul delays, the gate draws nearer. What pierced Faustina most deeply was realizing that the soul taken after death did not appear surprised. There was no sudden awakening, no cry of injustice, only recognition, a dreadful clarity. The soul saw what it had chosen, not once, but many times. Hell revealed itself not as a trap, but as a destination freely approached. This did not make Faustina despair. It made her burn with compassion. She understood that Jesus showed her this not to announce doom, but to intensify mercy, to warn while time still remains, to awaken consciences before the final moment, when choice solidifies into eternity. She knelt in the chapel and whispered a prayer for all souls who believe the gate is far away, who think conversion can be postponed indefinitely, who do not realize how near the crossing truly is. She prayed especially for those who live without hatred, yet without surrender, without rebellion, yet without repentance, without evil intent, yet without love. In that prayer, Faustina felt a quiet urgency settle into her soul, not panic but resolve. She understood her mission more clearly than ever, to remind the world that divine mercy is vast, but it must be embraced in time. And the gate of hell stands nearest to those who refuse to decide. In the days that followed, Saint Faustina moved through her duties with an interior vigilance that had not been there before. She swept corridors, prepared simple meals, and attended prayer with the same outward calm as always, yet inwardly her soul remained alert. The vision had not left her. What haunted her was not the fire she had seen, nor the demons, but the frightening normality of the soul's journey toward that gate. Nothing about the path looked extraordinary. That was its danger. While kneeling in the chapel one afternoon, Faustina felt Jesus return her to that moment after death, when the guardian angel took the departed soul. She understood more clearly now that death does not suddenly change the soul's direction. It reveals it. The soul continues moving in the direction it has chosen throughout life. Habits become destiny, interior decisions solidify. What was hidden becomes visible. Jesus allowed her to sense the interior state of that soul again, not as an image, but as a spiritual truth. The soul was not ignorant of God. It had known Him. It had received graces. It had been warned gently many times, but it had postponed surrender. It had resisted conversion not violently but quietly. Faustina felt how subtle this resistance was. It did not feel like rebellion. It felt like control. The soul wanted God on its own terms. This was the revelation that pierced her most deeply. The soul had not hated God. It had simply loved itself more, and that self-love, left unpurified, had shaped its eternity. Faustina understood that hell is not the result of one grave moment, but of many small refusals stitched together over time. Each refusal weakens the will. Each ignored grace dulls the conscience. Each rationalization hardens the heart. Eventually, the soul no longer recognizes mercy when it stands before it. As she prayed, Jesus impressed another truth upon her spirit. The gate of hell is not hidden. It is visible to the soul long before death. The conscience senses it. The heart knows when it resists truth. The interior unrest that follows sin is already a warning, a signpost saying, "Turn back now." Grace never stops pointing away from the abyss. Faustina felt sorrow, but also clarity. She saw that the guardian angel's role was not to condemn, but to accompany the soul to what it had chosen. Heaven does not violate freedom, not even to save. Love invites, love warns, Love waits, but love does not force. She lowered her head and felt the weight of responsibility that every human life carries. Not fear, but gravity. Eternity is shaped quietly, she realized, in ordinary moments, in how one responds to grace when no one is watching, in whether one listens to the conscience or silences it, in whether one chooses humility or insists on self-rule. That afternoon, Faustina wrote with trembling honesty that what Jesus had shown her must awaken souls while there is still time. The gate is near, not because God is cruel, but because life is short and freedom is real. Mercy stands closer still, but it must be chosen. She whispered a prayer that rose from the depths of her heart. Jesus, do not allow souls to sleep while eternity approaches. As evening descended upon the convent, Saint Faustina felt an unusual weight pressing gently upon her soul. It was not fear, but awareness, a deep interior knowing that what Jesus had shown her carried consequences not only for eternity, but for the present moment. She walked slowly through the cloister, the fading light slipping through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Each shadow reminded her of how easily the soul can walk in partial light while believing itself safe. In prayer that night, Jesus allowed her to understand something further about the moment after death. The soul, he showed her, does not encounter a foreign reality. It encounters truth. Everything hidden is revealed without disguise. The excuses that once felt reasonable lose their power. The justifications collapse. The soul sees itself exactly as it is, without hatred from God, but without illusion either. This clarity, Faustina understood, is unbearable for a soul that has trained itself to avoid truth. She remembered how near the gate had been, not isolated, not distant, not sealed off. It stood close to the road the soul had already been walking. That closeness was the most frightening aspect of all. Hell did not appear suddenly. It waited at the end of a path shaped slowly by repeated choices. The soul had not been pushed there. It had arrived. Jesus impressed upon her heart that the soul's greatest regret at that moment was not punishment, but memory. It remembered every grace ignored, every invitation postponed, every interior warning dismissed. The soul realized that mercy had stood near for years, perhaps decades, asking gently to be welcomed, and now that mercy still existed, but it could no longer be embraced in the same way. Time had ended. Choice had solidified. Faustina felt tears rise as she knelt in the chapel. She understood now why so many souls live, as if eternity were distant. To believe the gate is near would require vigilance. It would require humility. It would require surrender. And surrender is the one thing the human heart resists most fiercely. Jesus revealed to her that many souls misunderstand divine mercy because they separate it from truth. Mercy does not erase responsibility. Mercy offers strength to change. When mercy is delayed repeatedly, not because of weakness but because of refusal, the heart becomes resistant even to love. This resistance, she saw, is what shapes the soul's final direction. She sensed the presence of her guardian angel once more, not visibly but interiorly. He stood as a reminder that heaven accompanies the soul until the final moment. Angels warn, angels protect, angels guide. But even angels cannot override freedom. That freedom is sacred, even when it leads toward ruin. As Faustina rose from prayer, she felt a solemn resolve form within her. She understood that her mission was not to terrify souls with visions of hell, but to awaken them before the path becomes fixed, to speak of mercy while there is still time to receive it fully, to remind the world that grace is abundant, but delay is dangerous. She whispered quietly, almost to herself, Jesus, let no soul believe the gate is far away. The following morning, Saint Faustina awoke with a sense of interior urgency that did not disturb her peace but sharpened it. The vision had matured within her overnight, no longer vivid in images, but rooted in understanding. She realized that Jesus had not shown her the gate of hell to describe a destination, but to expose a process. The danger was not only what awaited the soul after death, but how quietly the soul could shape that outcome while still alive. As she attended Mass, The words of the gospel seemed to fall with unusual weight upon her heart. Each phrase sounded like a personal invitation, each call to conversion like a final knock on a door that could not remain open forever. She felt clearly that heaven never tires of calling, but the soul can tire of listening. And when listening fades, responding soon follows. Later, while working in the garden, Faustina reflected on the moment when the guardian angel had taken the departed soul. She understood now that the angel did not accuse, did not argue, did not plead. He simply accompanied. The soul, stripped of time and illusion, recognized the path it had chosen. This recognition, Jesus allowed her to feel, was more painful than any external torment. The soul saw that it had shaped its eternity, not through hatred but through neglect, not through rebellion, but through repeated postponement of love. Faustina sensed deeply that many souls misunderstand repentance. They imagine it as a dramatic turning that can always be done later, at a convenient time, when life becomes calmer or circumstances improve. But Jesus showed her that repentance is not a moment reserved for the end of life. It is a posture cultivated daily. Without this posture, the soul becomes rigid, and a rigid soul, when confronted with truth, cannot bend. She remembered how near the gate had appeared, not looming, not threatening, but waiting, patiently. That patience, she realized, was not mercy. It was consequence. The soul had been patient with itself in resisting grace, and now eternity reflected that patience back to it, immovable and final. This understanding did not fill Faustina with despair. It filled her with zeal. She saw clearly that divine mercy is not cheap consolation. It is power offered for transformation. But power must be received. Mercy that is continually delayed does not multiply. It diminishes in effect, not because God withdraws, but because the soul hardens. She paused, resting her hands against the rough bark of a tree, and whispered a prayer for those who believe they still have endless time. She prayed especially for souls who live morally decent lives, yet resist surrender, who avoid serious sin, yet refuse total trust, who rely on God's kindness, but avoid His authority. These souls, she felt, walked closest to the gate without realizing it. As the morning light brightened the convent grounds, Faustina felt her mission crystallize. She was to speak of mercy with truth, of love with urgency, of salvation with realism, not to frighten but to awaken, not to condemn but to invite while the door remains open. She lifted her eyes toward the sky and prayed simply, "Jesus, grant souls the grace to choose you today." As night returned and silence once again wrapped the convent in stillness, Saint Faustina entered the chapel for the final time that day. The sanctuary lamp burned quietly, unwavering, as if marking the boundary between time and eternity. She knelt slowly, feeling that the revelation Jesus had given her had reached its final depth. What remained was not fear, but clarity, a clarity that demanded response. Jesus allowed her to understand the final truth behind what she had seen. Hell is not a sudden tragedy. It is a conclusion shaped patiently, freely, quietly by the soul itself. God does not hurl souls into darkness. He respects freedom so completely that even eternal loss is permitted when the soul insists upon it. This respect, Faustina understood, is both terrifying and sacred. She reflected again on the departed soul taken by the guardian angel. The soul had not been ignorant. It had known God's law. It had known His mercy. It had known moments of grace. But it had resisted the one thing mercy always asks for, surrender. The soul wanted salvation without conversion, forgiveness without repentance, mercy without obedience. And when the moment of death arrived, the soul discovered that eternity does not negotiate. Faustina felt the weight of this truth press against her heart. She saw how dangerous it is to presume upon divine mercy while refusing divine truth. Mercy is not indulgence. Mercy is strength offered to change. When change is refused repeatedly, the soul does not become neutral, it becomes fixed. And fixation is the true danger of the spiritual life. She looked toward the tabernacle and understood that the gate of hell is never closer than when the soul believes it is far away. When vigilance fades, when conscience is silenced, when prayer becomes optional, when conversion is postponed, The gate draws near not because God moves closer to condemn, but because the soul moves steadily away from light. Yet even in this sobering understanding, Faustina felt hope rise. Jesus impressed upon her soul that until the final breath, mercy remains nearer than the gate. Grace pursues relentlessly. Angels warn tirelessly. Conscience speaks faithfully. The danger lies not in weakness, but in refusal to listen. The soul that turns, even at the last moment with true repentance, is never rejected. She prayed quietly for all who live without urgency, who mistake God's patience for approval, who confuse delay with safety. She prayed especially for souls who live outwardly good lives, but inwardly resist surrender. Souls who rely on habit instead of humility. Souls who speak of God but do not belong to Him. As she rose from prayer, a deep calm settled within her. She knew why Jesus had shown her this truth, not to spread fear, not to announce doom, but to awaken the world before night falls, to remind every soul that eternity is shaped now in small choices, in quiet obediences, in hidden acts of surrender. She extinguished the candle, and the chapel fell into darkness, but not despair. For Faustina carried with her a light far stronger than fear, the certainty that divine mercy is immense, but it must be chosen freely, consciously, and in time. She whispered once more the prayer that summed up her entire mission. Jesus, I trust in you.